Welcome to Tales from the Bridge. This is episode 48, and we are talking about The Player of Games by Iain M. Banks. Two of us love Banks, two of us do not. I don't know what's wrong with those guys, but we're definitely going to hash it out in this episode. Next episode, Robert J. Sawyer joins us. Please be there for that one. Let's start things off with some science fiction, science fact, and be sure to stick around for some trivia at the end. Let's make our way over to the bridge.
Couple interesting things that I've come across over the last little bit. The first one is oddly a big flying bum, and it's not a literal actual flying bum, but it looks like a flying bum. It's a large aircraft that is partially blimp-like, full of helium, and it's also partially fixed wing, so it gets lift from wings. And it's made by a company in England, and I'm sure people have heard about this before. It's called the Airlander 10, and I'd heard about this in the past, and I understood that if you look at it from the back, it looks like a big flying bum. And I thought, you know what, this is just science fiction. They're just throwing good money after bad. But what I thought was newsworthy and noteworthy is that a Spanish airline has just bought 10 of them, and they spent $600 million on this.
Wow.
And so they anticipate that they're going to start getting them as early as 2025 or thereabouts. And they're going to use them commercially, for crying out loud. And it's going to be a different kind of air travel. It's going to be slower, maximum 130 kilometers an hour. And apparently they can fly in pretty much in most wind conditions up to 30 knots, and they can go up to 20,000 feet or thereabout. But it's about slow and environmentally friendly travel. I guess that's its whole shtick. And I feel like the only place I've ever heard or seen about this stuff is in science fiction. So I thought it was a good science fiction, science fact concept. What do you guys think about this idea of blimp travel?
Well, it sounds like steampunk-like right off the bat, right?
Yeah, and it's kind of counterintuitive, right? Everyone's like, oh, we're going to do like low orbit, like New York to Paris in 30 seconds type stuff, right? Like, I mean, that's sort of what you're used to hearing. So actually, I find it a little refreshing that there's this other, total opposite take on it and go, hey, like slow and steady, enjoy the flight and be environmentally conscious. And that's the kind of sell. I kind of dig it. I don't know if I'll ever use it, but I mean, maybe it's like a touristy / sort of thing. Like if I'm in Spain and they're like, you can take this really slow glide over the Pyrenees and get to Paris in 2 days. That's kind of cool. Like I'm open. I don't know.
I'm going to be the pessimist here. This was never going to work. That is $600 million straight down the tube as far as I'm concerned. I mean, no way. People can already get on a train to go faster than that anywhere inland, right? Like if you want to go across the Pyrenees, you can take a train. Anywhere in Europe, anywhere in, I guess even in North America, you can manage to take a train, and nobody does because it's going to take 4 days to get from here to Vancouver. So and it's expensive already just to take a train. I mean, maybe this will be cheaper, I don't know, than like a regular flight, and people who have 4 days to do a cross-country flight will do it, but they already don't do the train. So I don't see how this is. And then I can see this other, like, okay, maybe it's nicer than a train. It'll be like lots more room. It'll be, you get up and walk around. It'll be like a big ballroom or something, right? That you can hang out with, fancy people. But then that's again already a contradiction against the stated terms of being environmentally friendly. And the opulence thing isn't going to fly. With this particular marketing strategy. So if it's not luxury up in the sky and it's slow.
And what is its value proposition? Yeah, why?
What is the value proposition here? I mean, it must be. Well, I'd like to know, like, how cheap is it? But like, flights are already really cheap. You get on a budget airline like Flair goes from Toronto or Waterloo, as it turns out, to Vancouver. Like, I got a return flight for $500 just a little while ago. That's like 20 years ago prices. with some of the budget airlines. So unless they're beating that very significantly, I don't see it.
It's going to be really tough. I totally agree with you. And to me, you buy one. You buy one. You don't buy 10 for
Right.
$600 million bucks. That's you're really committing to that one. And this is a pretty innovative idea, and we all know what happens with innovative ideas sometimes. So
Yeah, it
anyway,
sounds like a CEO of one company knew the CEO of the other, right? And they're like, we need to build a market. We need an order for 10. But that's a lot of money to spend. I mean, I guess, okay, so transatlantic or transpacific then. Okay, so maybe it's not inland maybe it's the equivalent of a train ride, a long distance
it's
train
not.
ride.
As
except
I
that
understand it,
over the water.
it's Spain. It's inside. Air Nostrum is the name of the
Oh,
company,
really?
and they're planning routes domestically in Spain to
Okay.
fly locally, and they can each carry 100 passengers. So they're thinking Barcelona to Mallorca in 4 hours. But the
Okay,
plan
but that's still an island, so you still
That's
can't take
true.
a train.
Yeah.
So it's sort of over water. I
Mhm.
could sort of see that short distances over, water.
Yep. And to a tourist destination such as that, maybe that would make some sense. And I guess currently they're hybrid airships, so the motors are electric, but they are powered by some gasoline or jet fuel or something that powers those electric motors. But the plan is that by 2030, it would entirely be an electric powertrain. So there would be batteries up there. They're just not there yet. So it should be entirely carbon neutral, apart from the manufacturing process.
And what is the floating gas? Please tell me it's not hydrogen.
It's helium.
Okay, well that's good.
Yeah, and
Somebody
apparently it only
learns.
gets 40% of its lift from 60% of its lift from the helium. The rest is all from the fixed wing lift Bernoulli effect.
Okay.
No flights to New Jersey are planned.
Doesn't sound like it. I don't know that the market's there for green flights to New Jersey.
Yeah.
No,
I can see why they're launching in Europe and not the States.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of I wonder what the top speed is too. I mean, that's got a lot to do with
Pretty
it.
slow.
And
130 kilometers.
Yeah, it is slow.
130 kilometers an hour. Wow.
Yeah. I could run faster than that.
Well, you can certainly drive faster than that in most of the highways in Europe. So, yeah, that's
true.
Yeah.
Anyway,
a boulder uphill, I'd say.
Yeah.
You tell them I said that.
I will tell them. Although if you wanted to see it, you can Google the Flying Bum Airstream 10 to see what it looks like. Anyway, that's that. So it's I wanted to also bring up, we've talked about this before, the James Webb Space Telescope. And this replacement to Hubble Space Telescope. It gives us a better view out into deep space, and it's not super exciting to people who aren't really into that. I think it's pretty darn exciting, quite honestly. And I think a lot of people do. But what was noteworthy is they've released some of the first images. And the images they've stitched together a whole bunch of images that they've been taking. And they're totally phenomenal because this thing can see in non-visible light spectrums, infrared. And we've talked about this before. But the images, I don't know if anybody has looked at them. There's one in particular that is super weird, where it looks like you're looking through a sphere or you're looking through a tunnel, or if you're in the movie Interstellar, if anybody's seen that, when they're traveling really close to the black hole, things get all distorted, space-time gets all distorted.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the images looks like that. Did anybody else notice this?
I did notice one image I didn't understand. Is that the one of the exoplanet? Like they had a graph of the periodicity over top of it. I thought, and it kind of looked like a planet to me, and I was surprised that they were. But is that the one you mean?
No, that's not that one. That's probably also very cool. But the one that I was looking at is this. It looks like you're looking kind of through a sphere. It is what it is a whole bunch of different galaxies. And I thought to myself, why the heck do these things look distorted, like you're looking through a tunnel or a sphere? And apparently there's this effect that occurs that absolutely blew my mind. Marty, you may have heard about this before. I'm not sure if many of our listeners have, but it's called gravitational lensing.
Right.
Oh my God, how cool is the fact that something super dense that's in front of an object you're looking at distorts friggin' space-time so that it makes it look like it's bigger. It makes it look closer. So apparently they're able to see things that are 13 billion light years farther away because of gravitational lensing. So things are that much closer.
Hmm.
Anyway, that's why there was
Cool.
this weird effect, and nobody was explaining that to me, so I Googled it, and I learned about gravitational lensing.
See, I actually saw that in the text. So this is the main image that they released actually yesterday, I think, right? This is the first image they released on July 11th, and then they released like 4 more today to add to it. And this is the one with all the different galaxies. There's like 100 different galaxies in the picture.
That's
and
it.
I hadn't, when I looked at it, it didn't jump off the page to me that it looked like you were looking through a tunnel. But then when I read the text, it said something about gravitational lensing. So yeah, it turns out, I mean, this was the first and main proof of Einstein's theory of general relativity. It was the new prediction that general relativity gave you that no other theory of gravity has, which is that light would be bent by gravity. That's definitely non-Newtonian. So because this new vision of gravity is that it actually distorts space-time, and light simply travels in straight lines through space-time of whatever shape it is, that when like Eddington, Sir Arthur Eddington, did this experiment right away within a few years of Einstein publishing the general theory of relativity. If you have a very large, massive object pass in front of like a star, then you will see the light from that star get distorted and lensed. Like basically the gravity acts like, the gravitational object acts like a lens to sort of focus the light towards you. So you basically see the star behind it get brighter because it's like it's getting lensed towards you as the mass passes through, and then get dimmer again. And you can only do this during a solar eclipse. So they had to specifically send out this adventuresome steampunkish expedition up some mountains with all this equipment to catch, basically measure the brightness of a star behind the sun as during a full eclipse, because you just can't see a dim object like a star behind a very bright object like the sun when it's not eclipsed. So you have to have an eclipse in front of the sun, and then you use the sun's gravity to focus the light of the stars behind it. And sure enough, it totally panned out, and they got the results they needed, and it proved general relativity as the new paradigm for gravity. So I guess that's going on with this picture. That's really cool.
Totally mind-blowing, like just totally unintuitive. The fact that there exist all these galaxies in front of the galaxies behind them makes the galaxies behind them easier to see.
Right.
Really
Neat.
crazy.
Yeah. But also cool that like in that one picture, I gather you have light that's traveled here anywhere from 6 to 13 billion years, right? Like you just have that depth of view, I guess, right? There are ones 6 billion years of light travel closer in that same picture as the ones behind them. But that's pretty amazing. So the oldest objects we see in that picture are only 1 billion years after the Big Bang. So, that is, I think that's why they built this thing, right? This is the furthest back in time we've ever seen. And people were really curious if like really, really, really old galaxies, the first galaxies to form, presumably, are different than later galaxies.
Yep. And they say that they're going to be able to see much farther back in time in the coming weeks and months and years.
Oh, cool. Wow.
Yeah. This has only just begun.
Should we talk about some new movies, or what we're watching?
What have you guys seen that was good?
Well, I've only seen 2 in the last little bit, and that was Top Gun and The Doctor Strange 2. Those are the only 2 I've seen.
Okay, and the Multiverse of Madness. I thought it was good, and I was happy with it. I watched it in probably 3 different sittings. I didn't sit down to watch the whole thing. It was kind of during the day when I had a moment here and there in between doing stuff and work. But I did go to the theater to see the new Thor, and it's fun. And I'll just say it's fun. I really like the director. I think he's doing a great job. He did Ragnarok. Taika Waititi. Yeah, it's super, super fun. But super fun. However, I am feeling franchise fatigue, as Marty put it, because even though by the end I'm with it, I like the story, we're there, I'm getting a little bit maybe fatigued by the simple fact that every climactic scene in any Marvel movie is lots of kicking and punching. Sure, I get it. They all have really strong powers where their bodies are really strong, so their punches are super powerful and they can make you like go flying when they hit you with a weapon or their fist or their foot. But it's kicking and punching every time, and nothing is new about the way they're filming this. Like there's no new angles, there's no new technology, there's nothing new that's going, oh my god, the kicking and punching is cool now. It's still just kicking and punching. The only thing I can think of, and sorry to refer back to the Matrix, but the end sequence, the climactic scene, is all kicking and punching between Neo and Smith. That was new. I mean, you could still watch that now and go, oh, they just kicked and punched each other a whole bunch, and it was actually looked pretty good. But these, I don't know, just with Thor, it's still just kicking and punching, and I'm a little bit like, okay, so is that really it? That's where we're at now. We're either kicking or punching each other, or we can move things with our mind and hit each other with the things we're moving with our mind. And I'm getting a little bit like, okay, I don't know. But at the same time, I know I'm being a grumpy grouch there, because where else do we go in an action movie?
Well, the
How
answer to
else do you
that,
top that?
I think
I'm
the
with you
answer
on
to
that.
that is Doctor Strange too. I mean, there were so many different ways of fighting in that one. It wasn't all just kicking and punching, right? That one had it just and it was I don't know. I was on the side of really liking that one because I again it was again I don't see a ton of movies in theater, and so when I did see it, it was just one creative vision after another. These different Multiverse of Madness is an apt name because it's jumping from universe to universe. That was cool. I would love to slow down and think about the amount of time and effort that went into each one of those little universes that they were creating, and I'd like to go back and rewatch those. And then when they dropped zombie Doctor Strange, I was like, what? This movie's got everything. It's even got zombies. And anyway, it was just one thing after another. So yeah, I don't know. I thought it was pretty awesome. It wasn't all just kicky punchy. There's lots of stuff going on there from my perspective.
Once they turned the guy from Fantastic Four into spaghetti, I was like, I can't jump any more sharks here. I'm over it. And I ended up I was with like my wife and daughter, and everyone was just sort of groaned and were like, is someone in trouble here, or is this part of some bizarre court punishment that we have to continue watching this? Like, is there, and I realized that we weren't, and I released my family and we turned it off. I think
wow.
it was just and I liked the first Doctor Strange. Like, I liked Doctor Strange as a character. I liked the whole thing, and I just couldn't get through it. It was maybe if it had been an hour less, maybe it would have been fine. But I'm with Tristan on the whole kicking and punching thing. There's always the big fight scene, and that was, as a comic book collector, that was always my problem with the Avengers or with the X-Men, was like, I'm gonna get a big old, the fight the big boss at the end of every comic and everything. Like it never really grabbed me. And what I think the superhero, the Marvel movies that I like are more like Guardians of the Galaxy, where it is a struggle to like it that I can sort of more relate to. There's fewer superpowers. Yeah, there's good fighting, and there's a bit of that too. But they tend to win via prank at the end, and that's, I find it a little more clever and a little more watchable. And so for me, I'm not a huge. I actually haven't watched all the Marvel movies just because I feel like I'm getting the same movie or same version of the movie. And Thor, I never liked any of the Thor movies until Taika's last movie, Ragnarok, which I was like, oh, this is the first Marvel movie that I've liked other than Guardians of the Galaxy. So I'm more in that vein. What I liked about comics was when it gets quirky and weird and not too predictable. And I find that James Gunn and Taika Waititi bring that to the franchise, and that's keeps me engaged. So if it's a movie, if it's like a mashup and it's involving one of those two directors or their characters, I'm more apt to, like, if I know the Guardians are going to make an appearance, I'll actually watch the movie. If it's just Captain America or Thor on our own, and it's not Taika Waititi
Captain
or
America,
Hulk, forget it.
Ugh.
I'm not going to do it. Like, so I'm not, and I got a big comic book collection in my basement right now. But I have no X-Men, I have no Avengers, and there's a reason for it, for a lot of what Tristan was saying there.
And
Well,
what
your first
TT is
mistake-
doing a Star Wars. I don't know if you've heard that, but what TT is doing a Star Wars
I'm
filming.
pumped. I'm pumped for
too.
that.
Well,
And the Inkle. He's in line to do the Inkle.
Oh, right.
Oh, that's right.
That's
Oh my.
what it is.
Oh,
Yeah.
that is.
Yeah,
Well, that'll be awesome.
come on.
But listen, Sam, your mistake was trying to watch the new Doctor Strange at home. Like, that is a movie that's all about the effects, and you should have been at the theater, and you should have been strapped to your chair and not allowed to leave.
maybe.
Wearing your 3D
Maybe if I had-
glasses with, like, you know, the Clockwork Orange things forcing your eyeballs open. No.
If you could set that up, I'll go.
So yeah, that'll be the next theatrical experience. No, well, okay, so I get what you guys are saying about Doctor Strange. I too was a little bit fatigued by all the kicking and punching and all the killing off of alternate universe superheroes. Like, there was this whole long sequence there where they had to kill off Reed Richards and kill off all the, you know, they just killed everybody. From the alternate universe of superheroes, as if, you know, that in itself is like, oh, you know, I get it. Like, there was a time when we'd be like, no, you can't kill Reed Richards. But now we're in this whole multiverse thing where, like, just, you know, everybody dies all the time. And it's not as interesting or impressive as it used to be. And a comic book collector, right? Like, you know, the comic book where Superman dies or Spider-Man dies, or, like, you know, they kill the main character. That was a big deal. That was like a you know, a literary event in our childhoods. So I get that they're trying to kind of recapture that and recreate that. But, you know, I think they've gone a little too far into the whole multiverse thing, and that was a little boring. But what I liked about it was that it was a tongue-in-cheek spoof of every horror movie you've ever seen, right? They just took all the tropes from a horror movie, the zombies, the you know, everything, the doors closing, the soundtrack. Like, it was just a bunch of horror tropes that they put into this superhero movie, right? In a comical way almost, right? Like, it was ridiculous. Okay, we have zombie Doctor Strange now, and we have, like, demonic zombie Doctor Strange now, and we have anyway, it was a little over the top, but I kind of liked it. Like, if you get in the zone of, like, okay, we're now making fun of the tropes of a genre, rather than just telling, you know, the standard superhero story.
My favorite part of that film was when, spoiler here, but when Professor Xavier comes out and you hear the theme from the animated series from the X-Men. Remember the
Dude, you outgeek us.
Oh
so
no!
good.
Oh,
Yeah,
you
well
guys are
done.
too.
Anything to
You
do
guys are
with
too
me.
old. You guys are too
get
old
the
for this.
trophy, man. You get the trophy.
So this month's book is The Player of Games by Iain M. Banks. It is the second book in the Culture series, I believe.
Yep.
I often hear people say that this is their favorite. I hear this is the easiest to digest. It's definitely one of the most short full novels by Iain M. Banks in terms of the Culture series. It has a 4.3 on Goodreads, which is quite good.
Mhm.
And I read this a while back and loved it for many reasons. And the main reason that I wanted to read this now is because we actually have done an Iain M. Banks book before, and it was Kevin's choice. And this would have been a couple of years ago. We did Accession, which I believe was 96 or 97. I loved that book and just went, and I've been eating up as much Banks as I can because I just love his writing. I love every single book. So when I hear Marty, who is an extremely well-read science fiction fan, and Marty just devours books, and he doesn't like Banks, I'm thinking, well, he just hasn't read enough yet. Or he hasn't read this one yet, and this is going to be the one. And then also Sam wasn't a big fan of Accession. So I really felt like since having the podcast, we have not, I mean, we've bickered a bit about Banks, but we've never really talked about any of his books. And I just figured, you know what? The Player of Games is the book to read for anyone who has not read Banks before. And that being said, I also recently took on Use of Weapons, which I think I just adored. I might even say that it might be my favorite Banks book right now. It was so good. What an amazing ending to that book as well. I really loved Use of Weapons. I do feel every Banks book I've read, you learn a little bit more about the culture. And after finishing The Player of Games, you learn about the culture, and obviously you don't hear I don't know if you guys know, but you don't hear too much about special circumstances. They're kind of in the background a little bit more, but I find it to be a beautiful book. I love Ian's writing. I want to hear what you guys think.
Well, I can go from there. Yeah, I mean, I've read this one, but I haven't read it for a really long time, and going through it again was noteworthy. It's I thought it was a great story, like quite apart from the culture, which is the reason why I read Iain M. Banks's books. Is I just love that universe. I love the universe of the culture. It's my absolute favorite of any book of any series that I've read. And but in this one in particular, the culture did play into it, and we did learn a little bit more about the culture. But it was really more about the game and Gurgay playing the game, and the political intrigue related to that, and kind of the single bloody mindedness of our protagonist and his abilities to play this game. And it sounds kind of boring, but it was wildly creative, and Iain M. Banks is wildly creative in a way that is, I wouldn't call sophisticated, but I would call it more sophisticated than some of the books that I've read. But it was very accessible. Yeah, I would totally agree. Definitely not my favorite Iain M. Banks book. I really love the Iain M. Banks books where we really get into the nuts and bolts of the culture. I love the concepts of sublimation, the subliming of culture, of societies. So the Hydrogen Sonata, if anybody's ever read that, or Accession, those are some of my favorites. They're really dense. That's the best way I can describe them. Is you read through a paragraph in some of Banks's work, and you're like, wait a minute, what the hell did I just read? And you almost have to reread it. And in the rereading, you realize how much world building and thought has gone into that single paragraph. So it's one of those ones that doesn't lend itself nicely to listening to in audiobooks. And but I would hazard to say that The Player of Games is a little bit less like that. It's a little bit less dense. The characters, while not super duper likable and accessible, are fine. They're pretty good. They're one is there's weird drones. There's our character, I think, is human, although the version of human in the culture is pretty far into the future. I believe it's 10,000 years into the future or thereabouts since the beginning of the culture. So this is a long time down the road. And there's great climaxes. There's good action in this one. Yeah. So again, this was a great science fiction book. Not my favorite Iain M. Banks book, because I'm looking for a little more culture. Give me more culture. That's my take.
Yeah, I have not read the Hydrogen Sonata, and I'm going for that one next, Kevin, because you've said that, and I believe I have a copy of that. So.
What's actually just occurred to me, something else that's worth mentioning here, is the culture delicately tries to sway other societies, right? Like it comes in and through special circumstances and contact section tries to change societies for what they believe to be the better, right? Removing violent tendencies or stopping them from taking over other planets, etc. Which, if you think about the 1990s, that was a lot like the UN and peacekeeping, right? We don't talk about peacekeeping anymore, but that's very culture-y, though. So that's very much a product of the time of when a lot of these books were written in the 90s, and even into the early 2000s to a certain extent. So that's where Iain M. Banks is coming from with this as well, is how do we, the benevolent and obviously correct culture, because we're technologically advanced and we have no resource scarcity, how can we help you improve yourself even though you don't know that you should be improved? It's very paternalistic. So at least that's what we would say today. But back in the 90s, it wasn't so far it wasn't such a stretch.
Well, maybe I'll jump in here, but yeah. So what okay. So I don't like Iain M. Banks. I appreciate he is actually, science fiction literature, which is what I actually seek out. He is literary class, literary quality writing, but for my taste, bland. Okay, I find his writing style ultimately bland. It's like reading Douglas Adams, where nothing's actually quite funny. It's only just barely amusing. you know, like
I disagree with that too, man.
I know. Well,
Douglas Adams makes me laugh out loud.
Okay. So the reason so I agree. Player of Games, by far the best Iain M. Banks book I've ever read. I did even enjoy it moderately, like even an 8 out of 10. Certainly, I liked it better than Accession, and a lot more than Consider Phlebas, which is the first culture book, and way more than The Algebraist, which is not a culture novel and is entirely forgettable for the 800 pages I spent reading it. But this book, I get, if I had read this book first, I would probably generally like Iain M. Banks. It wouldn't have turned me off. I think, and I've read a lot of reviews, and now I understand my reaction. It is a much simpler Iain M. Banks book than all of his others. So Accession is complex, and a lot of his books are just more complex, right? He's got multiple plots and lots going on, and I'm not smart enough to follow all of it. But this one, I was smart enough to follow it. It was a fairly straightforward plot. I knew what was going on. But the thing so I will say that, what this book is a critique of modern culture. It's a critique of maybe 90s or even today's version of capitalism on planet Earth. So I'm going to read a little extract for our listeners. The thing to remember, Gurgay, the ship interrupted quickly, is that their society is based on ownership. Everything that you see and touch, everything you come in contact with will belong to somebody or to an institution. It will be theirs. They will own it. In the same way, everyone you meet will be conscious of both their position in society and their relationship to others around them. It is especially important to remember that the ownership of humans is possible too. Not in terms of actual slavery, which they are proud to have abolished, but in the sense that, according to which sex and class one belongs to, one may be partially owned by another, or others, by having to sell one's labor or talents to somebody with the means to buy them. Boom! A total, destructive,
Yep.
I don't know, commentary on our entire society, right? Like, that's actually where we're at.
And
In the case of
the
males,
game of Assad, isn't that just a perfect parallel to capitalism? They're playing the game, and the ones who play the game well are the ones who dominate society.
Yeah, so I mean that's what. Okay, so I want to finish reading this. In the case of males, they give themselves most totally when they become soldiers. The personnel in their armed forces are like slaves, with little personal freedom and under threat of death if they disobey. Sam, you've been there, right?
It's absolutely 100% true. There's nothing more humbling than realizing that you're 100% expendable.
You're actually owned and really a slave. Even though we've abolished slavery, right? Like, oh no, we don't do that. But actually, our entire system makes this possible.
Yeah.
Females sell their bodies, usually entering into the legal contract of marriage to intermediates, who then pay them for their sexual favors by, oh, ship. Come on, he laughed. He had done his own research into the empire, reading its own histories and watching its explanatory recordings. The ship's view of the empire's customs and institutions sounded biased and unfair and terribly culture prim. So, for me, that sums up the whole book and what I liked about it. It is an excellent critique of the society we live in and we take for granted, we think is normal, right? And it's not. He sort of highlights the fact that it's incredibly violent. It is actually based on slavery. And we have an exaggerated opinion of our liberal society that we live in, blah, blah, blah. That we're so good and we've achieved and transcended all these things. And the fact is we haven't, right? So what he does with the culture is he manages to take this position far future of a better society, a better culture, a better, technologically advanced and socially advanced place to look back on something like Our Time Today and highlight how ridiculously backwards and barbaric we really are. So I appreciate that. I think that's great. That's a good, that's literature. It carries a social commentary and a social lesson, and that's all great. I just find, the writing's a little bland for me. It's a little bit not quite funny enough, and not quite creative enough, and not quite lyrical enough, let's say, right? And I like my a little more poetry, and so I might even read Use of Weapons. I've heard that's good. I might even read the Hydrogen Sonata now. Like I think he's a author that's definitely worthy of attention. I understand why he's considered literature when so much of so many other science fiction authors are not. But to me, he's still, unfortunately, a bit like Asimov and Clark. Good ideas, good, even good execution, but yeah, the writing is just a little, doesn't quite pull it off for me. It doesn't engage me enough. It doesn't quite, grab my emotions and my heart. But a good review and a good critique of modern society.
And I think that was a generous review, Marty. And yes, there are a couple highlights like that where you get that social commentary, but essentially the book boils down to Bobby Fischer in space, and it's well written and all that. But I really
I gotta give you a giggle there, man. That's fantastic. that could be the title of a review.
Yeah, no, that's right. It is Bobby Fischer in space, and if you're into that, you want to see someone who's really good at board games flying in a spaceship, this is your book. And so for me, the problem is that in between the sort of interesting plot points, it just feels like filler. There's world building, but it's heartless, and it's bland and without any real creativity, and the narrative reads as dryly as the protagonist's inner monologue, who doesn't want to be there in the first place. So why should I, as the reader? And it didn't take long for me to go, yeah, this is a well-written, boring book. and I don't have a reason to stay either. And so I actually didn't even finish the book. So it's bad form to not finish a book and then give a review on it. But here I am. So, you can write a letter. We have a link for you to write your complaints to. This is my second Iain M. Banks punishment. And I hold it against this group that I've had to do this again. But I think there's so much really interesting sci-fi happening right now. I think there's a golden age of sci-fi happening right now. So it's hard for me to experience that and then come back to something like this. And I think you have to be in the right place, right frame of mind, and maybe have a little more patience than me, and have probably a little more depth and intellect than me. And I totally give that up. But yeah, it was okay, but in a genre where I don't know that okay cuts it anymore. I think
Nice.
I think it's we're really into some interesting areas in space and technology and with this genre, and I didn't feel the need to continue, so I dropped it and I picked up the new Adrian Tchaikovsky book. So that's where I'm at. Yeah. And it's not as good as the first one, but it's still super awesome. So that was that's how my month has gone.
I read that one too. It was good as well.
Yeah.
Nice.
And that is The Eyes of the Void.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nice. I got to get that one.
Like, it's interesting to see the divide in who likes Bank and who doesn't in our group. It's the Star Trek versus Star Wars guys. And Star Trek is about techno escapism. It's about that utopian future where we don't need to worry. We got big guns. We got replicators that can create whatever food we want. We don't need to worry about too much. And there's a real sense of safety in watching a story like that or reading a story like that, because you've got this technological superiority that is just so awesome. And for me, I love that. I think that is a really cool thing. There exists other problems, but underlying that exists this technological superiority. And I know that's why a lot of people really like the culture. That's why I like it personally. And like I said, the idea of some of the concepts like sublimation, which I don't think it's mentioned in this book. It's transcendence. It's like Buddhism. It's like nirvana. It's religious concepts. It's super neat. I think anyway.
I like the Star Trek Star Wars. That seems to align here, but and I'm not trying to find more divide here, but I am interested to know, and maybe this is a bad analogy to make, but jazz music. I do find Banks to be some sort of equivalent to jazz, which is he is just jamming. He's not constantly trying to wrap up a chapter. He's not trying to wrap up a story necessarily. He's not trying to make a point that you've got to grasp. He's just wording what.
Well, yeah, and
So-
the
so
only thing
ja-
worse,
so-
the only thing
Wasting our
worse than
time, right?
jazz are the people who listen to it, and perhaps likely the people who read Iain M. Banks. I think you're onto something here, Tristan.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, no, I agree.
The jazz
There's
of the sci-fi world.
bloody jazz.
Now, I was going to make you guys read 1984. So we'll save that for the winter, maybe. And instead, I'm going to pull out a bit of a beach read, a bit of, now I haven't finished it, so I don't know how great it is. And it's by our great Canadian astronaut, Chris Hadfield, has written The Apollo Murders, his first science fiction book. It's pretty new. It's by an astronaut who's been to space, and it's totally conspiracy theory, that the space race went on behind our backs and we didn't know what happened. But Russia kept going to the moon, and so did the States, and all sorts of things happened there that we've never heard of. And so basically it seems a lot actually like we've discussed this before, this TV show For All Mankind, right? It's a sort of alternate history of the space race. So I think that's a lot what's going on in this book.
This looks great. It's got an almost 4 rating on Goodreads too, which is pretty good.
That's
with
pretty
a lot
good
of
for,
ratings, over 8,000 ratings.
Yeah.
I'm into it. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
There you
I
go.
can't believe you just did this, Marty. Wow.
Yeah, it's out of character. I
Is
dig
it? Oh, how is it out of character? I mean, okay.
Well,
I spent a long time trying to figure out what to do here.
I would have gone for I was expecting something a little more mystical.
This is quite mainstream. It's true.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
and I will say, you know me very well, and you're totally right. And if I'd found a worthy mystical novel to assign, I would have, but I didn't. And I was looking really hard for a long time. So we're going with the straight up mundane, space race alternate history.
No, this will be really good. I'm looking forward to reading it. However, you guys just bashed the shit out of Iain M. Banks, and I don't know what you think's going to happen, but there is not going to be any mercy on Hadfield here because
Oh, I
the
thought
guy,
you were gonna
the
threaten
guy
to
plays David
assign-
Bowie songs in space. I mean, that's way too easy.
And he's got a kick-ass mustache.
He's got a mustache.
So tonight on trivia, because we had to chill with Bobby Fischer playing chess in space, I decided to do a board game theme. So, and old school board games too. So Tristan doesn't have the advantage here. So question number 1: what is the origin of Candyland?
Disneyland?
Candyland.
But is the origin Disneyland?
No.
Obviously not.
So I got silence there, so I'm going to go ahead. So Candyland was actually created for quarantined kids. So this is from cheapism.com, the board game trivia update that they did to their blog. And a school teacher created Candyland in 1949 to brighten the day of children confined to a San Diego polio ward. Children would play during breaks from the Iron Lungs where they received treatment. So
Wow.
this is sort of origin story of that.
Wow.
Wow. I do need to say I've owned 3 copies of Candyland, and it's the worst game ever created. But I'm sure the kids would with polio loved it.
Yeah, if you're sitting there in an iron lung,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
just about any game is going to be a whole heck of a lot better
Yeah.
than whatever's going
Yeah.
on around you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's 1949, and you've got that sort of illness. It's got to be pretty tough. My dad actually is a polio survivor,
Oh wow!
and but yeah, so it's such a, and now there's post polio syndrome and everything. Like, it's really something else. But that's another topic. In the vein of board game origins, does anyone happen to know when the earliest game of checkers was discovered?
1032 in China.
900 BC in China.
And I'll
Oh.
say the 13th century.
All excellent guesses and all completely incorrect. Fans of checkers can claim to play the game that was enjoyed by ancient civilizations. A version of checkers dating back to 3000 BC was uncovered during a dig in the Sumerian city-state of Ur, now located in modern Iraq. Other versions have been traced to ancient Egyptians. Checkers continues to evolve and reach closer to its present-day form in medieval France. Okay, so there is actually only one answer here, and I've got it. What is the best version of Monopoly?
Star Wars.
London.
Nope. Kevin?
Guelph?
No.
It's a Guelph version.
The
I
best
saw that.
version of Monopoly is, in fact, contrary to all sorts of other input, is the My Little Pony version.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Oh, right. I
Well, there
forgot
are
about
some
that
friends
one.
of the show that would definitely back you up on that.
Yeah, if you want, yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah, and Fluttershy is the best character from the game. Just FYI,
Well,
Imperial
objectively, that
Jack-
must be true. There's no subjectivity there whatsoever.
none whatsoever. None
Mhm.
whatsoever. In what country was Chutes and Ladders invented?
France.
Germany.
Nope.
Portugal.
India.
Oh,
Ooh,
we're so Eurocentric.
Yeah, Chutes and Ladders began as
Mhm.
a morality lesson. The game, also known as Snakes and Ladders, traces its roots to ancient India. Ladders were meant to represent rebirth, and the player ascended to higher life forms via good deeds, while snakes whisked players to lower life forms because of evil doings. When the British adopted the game in the late 1800s, Victorian ideals like obedience and vices like indulgences made their way to the game. And once it came to the US in the 1940s, it was rebranded as Chutes and Ladders, and the heavy-handed focus on morality was softened. And finally, where was Yahtzee invented?
North
Yahtzee!
Dakota. Is Yahtzee a place?
Surely Yahtzee is a place.
It is not.
Oh, okay.
I said North Dakota.
You're going to hate me
Finland.
for this, but unfortunately, so we're all 0 for 5 here, just so you know.
Yeah.
No one wins the iPhone that I had
Oh,
for everybody.
no.
Sorry. Oh, man. I guess. Anyways, it was invented on a yacht. So
Ah,
I know one of you guys is going to throw a
no.
bag of dog poop on my doorstep
Oh,
tonight.
that's terrible.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I just had to put it in there. A wealthy Canadian couple invented the game as a way to entertain their friends on board their yacht. After
Wow.
it proved to be a big hit amongst their friends, the couple consulted with a toy maker who loved it, bought the rights, changed the name from the relatively generic yacht game to Yahtzee. And there you have it.
Wow.
Yacht game.
Yeah,
What a
Sorry,
Canadian.
guys.
Only
That's what I
Canadian
got.
could invent a game like that, right?
what
Yeah.
should we call it? Yacht
It's really
game.
exciting. It's so much fun. Let's call it the yacht game.
Yeah, the yacht game. Yeah, wealthy but lacking creativity.
Thank you for joining us once again. Are Kevin and myself wrong about banks? Or is it Marty and Sam? Let us know. We want to hear from you. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. Email us. Let us know. We want to get you in on the conversation for sure. Next week, Robert J. Sawyer is joining us, so please be there for that one. All right. Until next time.